Happy coding.
Hello, Kevin here yet again in our next video in our series of Intro to Web Development. I'm sort of doing these JavaScript videos kind of rapid fire. I'm trying to break them down into like smaller videos instead of having one like hour-long one. Um, so for me, this is like video number 4 in a row, but that's fine. So anyway, welcome, and I'm going to just kind of keep building off of the previous video. So in the previous video, you learned about creating variables and sort of storing values in variables. And what I have is, I have my script.js file that I've been working out of, my index.html file, just in my glitch editor here. And right now, what I do is I ask the user for their name using the prompt function. I store their answer in a username variable, and then I create like a second variable called my message that contains hello and then the answer to their name. And then I pass that name into document.write, console.log, and alert. So in this video, we're going to build on that to learn about how to like make that stuff happen, like not right when the page loads, either after the page is done loading completely or when the user clicks on something. So let's just dive in. So the thing I want to sort of, come back to is the idea of like code running like line by line. And you can have a mix of things. You can like create variables on each line of code. You can call functions on each line of code. But what the computer is doing is it's reading it like line by line and just following your instructions. How I talked about like an assistant following a recipe way back when. So this line of code calls the prompt function and then stores the answer in username. This line of code then runs and it stores a new variable called my message, and it gives the value resulting from that operation. And then it calls document.write, passes in the my message variable, and then it calls console.log, and then finally it calls alert. So it's just doing that like line by line. So if I go over here and refresh, and I type my name, I want to go Oscar the Grouch this time, and I hit OK. Sure enough, I see hello Oscar the Grouch, hello Oscar the Grouch here, and hello Oscar the Grouch. But it's kind of annoying, right? Like you probably don't want to just like always pop stuff up like right when the page loads. Like it actually happens like before the page loads. So this pops up like before there's anything even in the page. So if you notice, like in the background, there's no text, and that's because, again, the computer is reading it line by line. So it starts in the HTML file. It, sees that it's HTML. It adds the title to the tab. So, the tab title is set here. It loads any CSS. In this case, I don't really have CSS, but it would load CSS. And then it loads my JavaScript, or it runs my JavaScript. And that's when it does all of this stuff. But in my HTML, it hasn't loaded the body yet. So I don't have anything in my background, which is a little awkward. Even if I do want to use a pop-up, it's still kind of weird to not have anything in the background. So how do I get around that? To do that, first I want to sort of take a minor detour to learn about the idea of creating functions. So you know how to call a function by writing its name and then a parenthesis and then any like arguments or parameters it takes. But we haven't really talked about creating your own functions. So to do that, how do I want to do this? I'm going to just kind of put this code like way down here and just kind of store it so that I can copy paste from it later, but like ignore it for now. So I'm going to put it all the way down there. So here I am in my script.js file, and I want to create a function or declare a function, it could also be called. So I'm going to do that by using the function keyword. So I'm going to type the word function and then a space, and I'm going to give my function a name. So in this case, I'm going to say like, I don't know, it's like say hello. And then I'm going to have a parenthesis. And then in here, I'm going to have any like arguments that I want to take into my function. In this case, I'm just not going to have any arguments. So I'm going to just end my parenthesis there. And then I want a opening curly brace. So it's a little similar to CSS in that way, where I have an opening curly brace. And Glitch is nice enough to add my closing curly brace. So what I do is I give myself some white space. And now in here, I can type, I can call functions, store variables, all that good stuff. So I'm going to maybe steal some of my code from below. So I'm going to maybe just copy all of this in there. And I'm going to hit prettier. So now I have this say hello function. And inside of that function, I prompt the user for their name. I declare a new variable called my message, which is just hello, that username. And then I write it to the page, I console.log it, and I click alert. So let's see. I'm a little suspicious that this line won't work, but we're gonna find out. If I go back to my index.html page, I'm just gonna refresh and see what happens. And ta-da, nothing happened. Why not? And that is because I haven't actually called that function. I have a function in script.js. I've declared it, but nothing actually calls it. So when the page loads this JavaScript, it says, okay, I have a function called say hello, and when that function runs, I'll run this code, but nothing actually runs this yet. So there's a few ways I can do it. One, I can put it like right in my JavaScript here. So I can say hello. This, doesn't really make sense because, what's the value of this? But, you can do it this way because I'm declaring a function and then I'm calling the function exactly like I can call any function in JavaScript. And if I refresh over here, sure enough, now it asks me my name. I'm going to say Kevin and I'm going to hit OK. And it says, hello, Kevin here. And it says, hello, Kevin there. So that's basically what we had before, but the whole point is I wanted it to not happen right at the beginning. So there's a couple ways I can do this. I think I'm gonna, let's make a button. So I'm going to change some of my HTML here. So I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe I'll change this to, I don't know, just like click here, and then I'm going to have a button. And here I'll say like, click me, I don't know, something like that. So this is just HTML. I haven't done any JavaScript stuff yet. This is an H1 tag, this is a P tag, and a button tag. And if I hit refresh over here, then sure enough, I just have my HTML stuff in my page, and then I have a button, and clicking on it doesn't really do anything yet. And that's okay, because that's what we're going to change next. So to like connect the dots a little bit, I can write HTML, which I've done here, by like, adding tags and, that's this syntax here. I can also add what are called event attributes to my HTML elements that tell the browser like what to do. So I want to tell the browser to do something when I click this button. So I'm going to add an on-click attribute by going like into the tag itself. So I'm sort of after the tag name, but before the sort of like ending to the opening tag. I'm going to put a space here, and I'm going to type on-click, and then an equal sign, and then quotation marks. And so inside of these quotation marks, I am now writing JavaScript. So I don't know, I could say just alert maybe. You can end it in a semicolon. Usually you don't when you're sort of like in the HTML like this, but you can, kind of up to you. But now I have a button element or a button tag with the content click me, and then an on click attribute that calls the alert function. I haven't really given it any parameters, but you could. So if I jump over to my page and I hit refresh, and then I click here, notice that nothing has happened. No alert has popped up yet, but if I click, now I see my alert. So, I am connecting my HTML to some JavaScript. And, you can call arbitrary functions here, but really what you generally want to do is call a function that you created that then calls a bunch of functions, because typing a bunch of JavaScript in here is super annoying. So I want to go remember what the name of my function is. I called it say hello here. And if I type that instead, say hello. So now I have a button with an onClick attribute that calls my say hello function when I click it. So if I go refresh, again, notice that nothing has happened yet. On page load, nothing has happened. So if I click here, now I get the pop-up asking me my name. So I'm gonna say Kevin Workman, and I'm gonna hit OK. And now that code runs. Now I see my alert with my hello Kevin Workman. I see my console.log with my Kevin Workman. And if I hit OK, sort of a weird thing happens here where my whole page changes to hello Kevin Workman, and like, what the heck? What? Why? So the answer to that is, let's go look at the code. So if I look at my script.js file here, and I look at my say hello function, again, the computer runs through this line by line. And remember that when this is happening, I already have content in the page. Like, I already have a button, I already have a p tag, I already have an h1 tag, all of that stuff is in the page. So when I get here, I am sort of overwriting what's already in the document. So document.write sort of clears it out first and then writes something to it. So you can use document.write, especially if you're like debugging, but usually once you get into like, having a project that works, you'll usually stop using it, which is why console.log is so useful, because you can keep using that one because it just goes to that JavaScript console. It doesn't clear anything out. It doesn't delete any elements that are already in your page. So I've gotten rid of my document.write function here, and if I refresh now, what will happen? So on page load, nothing has happened. If I click here, then I can enter my name. I don't know, Jack Skellington, and I hit OK. Then sure enough, I see hello Jack Skellington sort of in this alert. I also see it over here in my console. And, there's a bunch of other things that we could do from here. So I'm kind of debating on how into this I want to get, but there are, we've seen one event attribute. There are actually many event attributes. So one of the most popular ones is the onload function, which will basically put our code back to how it was before, but is really popular and really useful. So maybe instead of having this button, I'm going to delete this stuff. Maybe I did want my JavaScript to run like after the page loads. So I can have like body. I'm going to edit my body element here, and I'm going to add an onload event attribute. And in here, it's the same idea. I'm going to call JavaScript. So in this case, I'm going to call the function that I defined. And now if I go refresh, I'm sort of back to the model where this is just running like on page load. The big difference is that this is now like, after the page loads, which will come in handy in our next video. So I'm going to hit, my name and, blah, blah, blah. By now you kind of know what to expect from this code. But let's say I wanted to find other events. What else is out there? Well, I've sort of said a bunch of times now that my goal in this class or in these videos is not really to teach you every single thing there is to know. It's to teach you how you can learn more. So if I type in JavaScript, I don't know, event attributes, or maybe HTML event attributes would be better since we're putting it in our HTML. Sure enough, here are a bunch of results. So here's one from W3 Schools, and oh man, like there's lots of stuff here. So this is on like the window itself, which is like your browser. This is if you have like form, like input elements. This is like if the user is typing, if the user is clicking around with their mouse, if they're dragging, if they've like copied or pasted, things like that. You can even have like events for like playing a video, and there's all kinds of events. And that's just one page, that's W3 Schools. You can check out MDN, and here's even more. But the idea will be the same, where what you are doing is you are finding a HTML element, and you are adding the event attribute, which is its name, and then you are setting that equal to some double quotation marks that contain JavaScript, and that JavaScript can call, functions that you are defining in your own code. So that is events and creating functions in a nutshell. Okay, so the one thing I do want to talk about, because this is like a very common thing that you will encounter, is the idea of scope. So let me put this back to maybe how it was before, where I'm going to have maybe 2 buttons. So instead of having one button that does like a bunch of things, I'm going to split that up into 2 functions. So I'm going to edit my script.js, and so I'm going to say like function like ask name, and then in here I'm going to steal this line of code. And so in ask name, I am prompting the user for their name, and I am storing that name in a variable. And then in the say hello function, I am creating a new variable sort of based on the value of this variable, and then I'm like doing stuff with it, the same stuff I've been doing. So now I have 2 functions. I can call them from my HTML. So I want one button that says like what's your name, and then another button that says say hello. So in this on click, what do I want? I want ask name. And then in this on click, I want say hello. It's a little small, but let me make it a little bigger. So I've got 2 buttons that each have an on click. The first button has the text, what's your name? And then when I click it, it calls the ask name function. My next button contains the text say hello. And when I click it, it calls the say hello function. So if I go to script.js, here's those, ask name, say hello. So I've just split it up into 2 functions, which is fine. You can have many functions in your code, and this is a good way to like split your code up. But let's see what happens if I refresh over here. Actually, let me close my developer tools just to sort of demonstrate that. So if I click here, what's your name? Sure enough, I can type Kevin and I hit OK, and nothing happens. And I sort of expect that because my first function only asks my name. It doesn't actually say hello yet. So if I click say hello, what happens? And nothing happened. And when this happens, which this will happen to you, I promise, when you're writing JavaScript, you'll like be chugging away and you'll like be testing it out and like nothing happened. What the heck? The answer is go to your JavaScript console. Your JavaScript console is super duper, super important. So basically I would recommend always having it open. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to say, where's my more tools, and then web developer tools, and I'm here in my console. And here I get an error message. So by default, your browser doesn't show error messages because you don't want your users to like know all of your error messages. But as the developer, you do want to know what your errors are. So you need to open up your JavaScript console, and this is where your errors will be. So here I see uncaught reference error, username is not defined, and it even tells me like on which line of code it's happening. So script.js line 7, let's see if that actually matches up. It does. So over here, this is where it gets handy to like have a code editor. I can see line 7. My error message was username is not defined, and username is not defined. So why is this happening? This is defined, right? I defined it up here. And this gets at a very important concept in JavaScript and many programming languages called scope. So a variable is in scope in whatever function you have defined it in, or in whatever block you've defined it in, which we will talk about more later. But basically inside any curly braces, that is a block. In this case, we've only really used functions. But as soon as your block ends, or as soon as your function ends, your variable is basically deleted. And this helps, keep like freeing up memory, and, you don't want to leak a bunch of variables for no reason. So when your function ends, your variables go out of scope, which means they're deleted, which means you can't use them anymore. So I have my one function, ask name. I create a variable in here, but then it immediately ends. It immediately goes out of scope. So there is no username function or username variable anymore. So then when I call this function, and I try to use username, this is an error message. This is your assistant who's not very smart saying, "Oh no, I don't know what to do here," and so it just fails. It just breaks. And glitch is actually pretty handy in that it actually warns you when you'll get into a situation like this with this red dot over here, and it's got like a red underline over here. So this is another hint that if you see this, like something is wonky. So in this case, we need to put the username variable into what would be called like a higher scope. And the way you can do that is by defining your variable sort of outside of your function. So I'm going to say let username here, and then I'm going to delete the let keyword from here. So now when the browser runs my code, I first create a variable called username. And then I define two functions. I define ask name, and it doesn't run the code inside of that yet. It's just like getting that ready. You can think of it as like, I don't know, writing down a recipe on a note card, but not actually following that recipe yet. It's just sort of, available. And inside of that function or inside of that recipe, it's going to actually set the value of that variable. And then in my next function, which I'm just defining here, I use the variable, and then I call a bunch of functions and stuff. And this will work because now my username variable is in scope, sort of outside of both of those functions. So if I refresh over here and I click what's your name, and I can type Kevin here, and I hit OK. So I've stored the variable I've stored my name in the variable, and now if I click this, say hello, sure enough, there's hello Kevin here, and there's hello Kevin here. Maybe one thing to note is if I refresh, like what happens if I click say hello first? I haven't actually entered my name. Well, we can try it. Say hello. And it says hello undefined. And that's because I have this variable, but I haven't actually given it a value yet. So if you see undefined in your code or in an error message or in the console, that is an indicator that you have created a variable, but you haven't actually set its value yet. Okay, so those are some common error messages and error states that you'll get in. I wanted to mention them because like you will encounter them, I promise. Like you can't code without encountering errors. So the best advice I can give is like open up your JavaScript console. Always have that open because that's where your error messages will go. And that will take you from, wait, nothing happened, I have no idea, to, oh, I have this error message, and you can Google that error message or ask me or your classmates or whatever. So that just makes it a little easier to get unstuck. Okay, so that's where I'll end with creating variables. We are chugging along in our JavaScript journey here. So we now have the ability to create our own functions and use those event attributes to trigger those functions based on user input. In the next video, we'll talk about like actually making the page itself interactive instead of always relying on these pop-up boxes. But for now, this is good enough. So I'll see you in the next one. And until then, happy coding.